about what I have been doing. And just that morning, actually, I'd had 2 calls from 2 different people, and I just narrated the experience. So on a Friday morning, when they gave me back the paper of how they had put together what I have been doing, it shocked me. And it shocked me. And just this afternoon, I was sharing with my daughters that language, the power of words, the way it was put, which is real because it was nothing out of what I usually do, but the way it was put, even to myself, made me realize, wow, I'm doing something. Yeah. So yeah, the power of words.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. So I'm going to start, and as you know, I'm going to be talking about my experience transitioning from working for large corporations for several years, in fact, for more than 20 years, to working for myself. So I just want you to remember that this is my experience, but as I share this experience, I hope that you will find in my experience something that can inspire you if you are looking at doing that, or something that can inspire you in any other way. I will speak for about 40 minutes, and after that, you will have the opportunity to ask questions. If you have a question as I speak, you can always just put it in the chat box, but you will get an opportunity to ask any questions or to make comments, either related to what I will have spoken about or any related topic, and I will do my best to answer you. So I first joined the corporate or the business sector back in Q1 of 1996, and I left in Q4 of 2017. And according to my calculations, that is actually 21 years. If you look at the quarters, 21 years in this country, a 21-year-old is considered to be, fully matured. What do they call it? That they have attained their age of majority. I understand that's how long it takes an original baobab tree to fruit. 21 years is not a small time. It's quite a considerable amount of time. It is less than half my age, but it is quite a considerable amount of time. And in those 21 years, I worked for 3 large multinational corporations. My role took me to several countries in Africa and in Europe. I was counting the other day, and I found that I had actually visited about 31 countries, and most of these visits were related to work. So I did experience that, that life, those business class travel, 5-star hotels. There was a time in my life that I spent, I think, 3 weeks in Mauritius working on a project. And I have to say that I really have got no complaints about my corporate journey. It was a fantastic experience in very many ways. I can see how much I grew in those 21 years. But that's not the story that I want to share today. My story actually begins on December 1st, 2017, because that's the day that I walked out of a corporate office for the last time. And when I say corporate collaborator, I just mean working for a large corporation. And as you know, when you work for a large corporation, you don't work on your own. I worked in actually some of the largest international corporations. So there were many businesses, there were many divisions, there were many people. So in fact, I was actually collaborating with a lot of people. And being part of those large structures also created some complicated functions and complicated relationships. I left my job in good faith. I had a redundancy package. I even had a say in how long I wanted my transition to be. And I was actually walking into something that I had kinda planned for several years. And I say kinda for 2 reasons. The first reason is that I had always spoken of my desire to quit, being a corporate employee when I turned 50 and when my son went to university. And those 2 things happened in the same year. They actually happened in 2017. I have to say, though, that I had said this to some people, but never really thought about it until one of my friends reminded me when I called her to say that the day had come that I was actually moving away from the corporate sector. And the second reason I say that I was walking into something I had kind of prepared for is that years before, when I was training to be a coach, I had attended a class titled The Business of Coaching. And as part of that class, I had to work on a project which involved creating a business plan. So I had to identify a target customer, define or make a marketing plan, define my pricing models, decide on a PR strategy, and all those things. I mean, I even had to have a business name. So at the end of it all, I just thought to myself, this cannot go to waste. I mean, I have a whole business plan and I have thought through it very well. So I decided to register a business. I wasn't able to do much with it. So I operated it as a side hustle for nearly 10 years. And I have to say here that my employers knew about it, and I was very careful not to get involved into, what do they call it, conflict of interest. The important thing here is that there was a structure. There was an existing business structure, and I had a history with some clients. I had a website, I had a bank account. And so on the day that I walked into that business, I wasn't starting from scratch. And that brings me to my first tip for today. And that is that it's important to recognize the opportunity. So my first relevant opportunity was back in 2010 when I realized that I could register a business, that I had a solid business plan, and I acted on it before. Thinking back, I realized that I had had a small business before after I finished my A-levels, because I mean, I belong to that generation. I used to bake and sell birthday cakes. So it wasn't a very structured business, but I was known in the estate, and people would come to the door and knock and ask for a business, for a birthday cake, and I would bake and I would sell and I would make some money. But when I went to university, I mean, I stopped doing that business. I actually handed over that business to somebody, and that person is in this call. Maybe they will tell us what they did with it. But sometimes I wonder what would have happened to that if I had persisted with it. So the point here is there may be something that you are currently doing as a side hustle, which could become your next business, which could become your next occupation. The only reason it is small now is because you cannot pay attention to it if you're still in full-time employment. And even if it's not what you want to do for the rest of your life, it could be a starting point. So if you're sitting on something like that, or if you have a certain talent that you can commercialize, think about doing something with it, because you never know where it could end up. And when I say opportunity, I also refer to the situation that could lead to your transition. As I said, I worked for large businesses, and my last role was with a global business. I was actually the what do they call it? The regional director responsible for a number of countries across Africa. So I was very, very aware of the business challenges that we were facing as a business globally. I was also very aware of the options that were being considered in terms of managing that business and managing the bottom line. And of course, restructuring was one of them. And because I understood the business case, I also understood that redundancies at a high level are very attractive, because they can have an immediate significant impact on the bottom line. And it is for this reason that I wasn't surprised when my executive vice president left the company. He took a redundancy package, and I was actually waiting for my turn to come. So the day that my turn came, actually, I was prepared. The conversation that I had with my boss, who had flown from France in order to have that conversation with me, wasn't as difficult as some of those conversations can be. And some people that I have spoken to have had very difficult conversations when it was time for them to separate from the companies that they were working for. So seeing the writing on the wall is also an opportunity. There's actually a very big difference between taking a redundancy package and leaving your job with your last paycheck. That redundancy package will really help you. It can cushion you as you're making the transition. So I saw the opportunity, and notice I am saying opportunity, and I am not saying that, it was bad luck or it was a negative thing. I really looked at it as an opportunity. And by coincidence, it actually matched the plan that I had had for several years when I was thinking that I should retire when I turned 50. And I think there's a psychologist who calls this coincidental synchronicity. When certain things just come together, even if you are not expecting them to, or if you had not planned for them to come together. Looking back, I recognize that that plan that I had had in the back of my mind about leaving my corporate employment at a certain stage of my life actually guided certain decisions that I started making 5 years prior to 2017. For example, I retired my mortgage way before it was due. I made certain revisions to my investment decisions. And when I look back, I realized that I was actually getting ready for that moment in 2017 without necessarily realizing that that's exactly what I was doing. And so looking at this as an opportunity means that you don't resist it. You don't allow the fear of making the transition to hold you back. Rather, you look at the opportunities that that situation presents, and that makes the transition so much easier. And this then brings me to my second tip, which is that know that it will end. You know, that cushy, high-flying corporate job, it will end one day. Whether you will work until you drop, or you will retire at the statutory age, or you will take early retirement, or you will be forced out due to redundancy, that job will end. That regular paycheck will end. That organized structure, that relationship with a business that has been in existence in some cases for more than 100 years, it is going to end. So think about what you will do when that time comes. You may decide to transition into solopreneurship, as I did, or you may decide to go into full-time voluntary work, or whatever it is that you will do beyond that corporate job. I think it is a good idea for you to think about it and to prepare for that. And acknowledging that this kind of job is going to end allows you to make certain choices about your investments, as I said, that will help with your passive income. Because two of the things that you're going to deal with when you leave a corporate job is much more time on your hands and much less money coming in. So that is a reality, and the more you prepare yourself in advance, the easier it will be for you to make that transition. You can anticipate certain expenses and prepare for them. If you still have children who are in high school or in primary school, you can calculate how much school fees you're going to need. You can get yourself a financial coach, and there is one over here, and I'm going to ask her to introduce herself at the end. So you can make certain decisions that will make it easier for you to make that transition when the time comes. You can even start, you can register a company in advance. You can also start thinking about the networks that you're going to need for the next phase of your life. Being very intentional about it, and this is actually my tip number 3, really related to the fact that you become very intentional about how you are preparing yourself for that transition. You can learn very many things from the corporation that you are currently working for, if you're still working for a corporation. And so my third tip is borrow with pride. Corporations have got very many processes down pat. They have processes that help them to generate new ideas, and progress these ideas to a logical end, whether that logical end is going to be a new product or a new service, or whether they are going to decide that that idea actually cannot go anywhere. They have processes to measure performance, how to log learnings, how to develop people. They know they have processes for tracking certain indicators. So you can borrow a lot of processes, including policies, like HR policies. I know that I'm talking about being a solopreneur. That doesn't mean that I work 100% alone. I have certain collaborators. I have people who assist me, but it is because of the experiences that I had at the corporation that I realized that I don't have to employ everybody who works with me. So some of the people that work with me as consultants. Some of the people who work with me as partners. And also, because of my experience as from the corporation, I got a good understanding of certain legal requirements, certain contracts that I can work with. All these things you can learn while you're still at the corporation and use them when you transition into working for yourself. You can borrow ideas for presentation templates, because chances are you will still need to make certain presentations. You may want people to finance your business, or you may want to, to sell ideas or to sell products to different people, and therefore you have to make presentations. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Starting with something and then adapting it to your needs is actually easier than starting from scratch. So I can imagine that those of you who work for corporations or other large bureaucracies are probably groaning when you think about how long it takes for decisions to be made or to get things done. So you're thinking about all the negotiations, you're thinking about balancing the views of the chief financial officer with the chief marketing officer, with the CEO, with the marketing director, with the compliance people, with the legal team, and you're just thinking, I'm not going to do that in my business. And yes, you're not going to do that in your business, because as a solopreneur, you are the CEO, the CFO, the COO, the CMO, the legal, you're everything. And so making decisions is going to be considerably shorter, but because you have got experience with certain structures and certain processes, you are likely to make better decisions than you would if you are just using only your own experience, or if you are not borrowing from what you learned in the corporations, because those processes work, and those processes exact a discipline that many startups do not have, and many SMEs actually take years to create that discipline. I have to mention that there's a caveat here. You have to be mindful of intellectual property. So don't take anything that you shouldn't. But where there are no restrictions, by all means, borrow templates and all sorts of things. And obviously, because you haven't worked in all departments, you're not everything, you need to reach out to others in the organization as you're learning, as you're being intentional about preparing for the future, which is my tip number 4. Work your networks. Starting with internal networks. And this requires that you have good interpersonal relationships. I mentioned to you that my boss flew all the way from France to have that conversation with me. I had a very good farewell party with my colleagues. And as recently as 2 months ago, one of my former country managers from Ethiopia called me to ask my advice about something, because he felt that he could trust me. He felt that I could give him credible information. You cannot continue having such relationships if you did not cultivate them while you are still working for the organization. So I was in marketing. You might be in another department, but you can learn from other departments. So the procurement team can help you, for example, to identify suppliers that you might need for your new venture. They might give you some tips about negotiations. They might introduce you to somebody who will give you some good deals. The finance people could help you with organizing your books. They could help you with tax issues. The marketing people might help you on brand topics and many other things. So reach out to other departments, reach out to to people who have got different skills from you, but skills that you will need in your new venture if you're becoming a solopreneur. Because I mean, whether the business is small or the business is big, there are certain functions that still matter. I mean, you still have to keep records of your finances, you still have to pay your taxes, you still have to procure maybe goods and services, you may have to hire some people, you may have to, to sign certain contracts. So you can use all the help that you can get. Another way that you can use your internal networks is perhaps to have some of the people help you with some of your business with some of your business functions as a side hustle for them, if it is not a conflict of interest with the corporation that they are currently working with. But I think another very important thing that can help you have a head start as you transition from corporate to working for yourself is living with a contract from your corporation. So don't be shy about asking for business. If you're going to go into training or cleaning, maybe you're going to be stitching uniforms, maybe you're going to be delivering lunch, whatever it is that you're thinking of going into, have a conversation with your corporation. If it is something that they use, they will probably give you some special consideration because they know you. Especially if you have been working for them for several years, as many people do. But it's not just internal networks. Leverage external networks as well. So before you leave the corporation, you can send out a farewell note to all the contacts that you had as, in your role at the corporation. Tell them what you're transitioning into and let them know that you're going to call on them to discuss it further. Not everyone is going to be receptive, for sure. But I mean, what do you have to lose? And when you do that, by the way, you're going to realize that very many people in corporate have got side hustles, and some of the ones who are not very receptive to you might just be seeing you as potential competition, but that's part of the game. So don't take it personally. But people you worked with before could become your very first customers. They could introduce you to potential customers. They certainly form your first mailing list. And if you think this doesn't matter, ask someone who's just starting a business. Before you can create a mailing list, you need to know people. So first of all, you get to know people, get their contact details, have them recorded somewhere, have certain, start building a relationship, because before you can comfortably, start discussing business with them. This takes a lot of time. If you have been working in a corporation for a long time, you certainly already have a long list of people that you could potentially reach. And I suggest that you send out that email while you still have, that title in the corporation, because whether you like it or not, there's a difference between director, someone from large corporation Y, and director, another from small company that no one has ever heard of, even if you're the same person. That's just a fact of life. And this brings me to lesson number 5. What's on your pizza? Actually, this lesson has got nothing to do with pizza, but I told you that I was in marketing and I just like being creative, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later. The thing is that pizza is generally round, and you slice it up into usually 8 pieces, which is actually very similar to the wheel of life that sometimes people use to try and assess how balanced their lives are. But as we all know, even if you're cutting up the pizza, you never get all the slices exactly the same size. Some of them are bigger than others. And that's just kind of what life is. It's never in perfect balance. But I don't think the thing is that you want to have it in perfect balance or that you want to have the slices exactly the same size. But I imagine that you just want to be sure that they are more or less the same size. And so it is with your life. So you currently play many roles in your life aside from the corporate role. You may be a spouse, a parent, perhaps you're a Rotarian, perhaps you're the chair of your chama, or you participate in a church committee. You play many roles, and you try to keep them in balance, not by giving them equal attention, but by giving each role the right amount of attention, the right degree of resources that it needs for you to perform adequately in that role. And this is what we are always striving to do. And the main resources really are time and energy. So the thing is that you are not likely to require exactly the same amount of time and energy in each role. And chances are that your corporate role takes up a big chunk of your time, your energy, and other, personal resources, because that's just the nature of work. And so that also means that when you leave this role, there's going to be a big hole. There's going to be a big gap. And for you to transition effectively, what you want to do is to minimize that gap as quickly as possible. I've already mentioned that the same title doesn't carry the same weight if it is a title that is related to a big corporation, and if it is related to a small startup, as it does when it is related to a big corporation. There has to be something to make up for that gap, and that something actually depends a lot on how you see yourself in your corporate role. What does it mean to you? To what extent do you value what you do for the corporate? And to what extent can you separate who you are versus away from that corporation? So think about what you do in a large corporation, especially if you've been there for a long time. It suggests that you're in a senior position. You're probably making decisions. You're developing strategy. You might be leading innovation. You're mentoring people. These are things that you can do even away from that corporation, because this is you. This is knowledge. This is skill. This is experience. It's not your title. So the question is, are you going to remember this when you make the transition? Many people who struggle with making that transition struggle because they are not able to separate themselves from the title that they held at the corporation. And if you feel that this is going to be a challenge for you, if you're still in a corporation and you feel that this is going to be a challenge for you, it is something that you need to start thinking about. Start developing relationships outside of the corporation. Start taking up roles outside of the corporation. Start dedicating more resources to the other roles in your life so that you reduce the size of the gap that the corporation is going to leave when you separate from it. Build meaning from other sources. Many corporate contacts will no longer have time for you, but you will have time for more contacts, the contacts that you choose, rather than contacts that you have to spend time with because it's your role, it's your responsibility as a corporate collaborator. And the thing is that when you leave the corporation, it's very likely that you're going to feel the pull to do something that you really care for anyway. It's very unlikely that after so many years of dedicating your service to a corporation, maybe you have dedicated your time to raising a family, maybe you have been dedicating your time to building investments so that in the future you don't have to struggle financially. You probably want to now just do something that just makes you happy. Yeah, but for you to do that, it means that you have to be ready to separate yourself from your role as a corporate collaborator. It can be a struggle. So be intentional about realigning your personal priorities. Be prepared for the gap, but also make plans to close that gap and look out for the rewards of shedding the responsibility. I mean, that big name corporate title is a responsibility. It's a weight that you carry on your shoulders, even if you don't realize it. And just going back to the pizza, you can choose what you want on your pizza. You can choose whether you want a thick crust or a thin crust or a gluten-free crust, whether you want more cheese or more ham or more tomatoes or chili on your pizza. So think about your transition into solopreneurship as your opportunity to choose what's on your pizza. It's not something that somebody should choose for you. So there'll be no more fitting into a process or a template, or having to work crazy hours because you're dealing with people in different time zones. You can actually pick and choose depending on what you want to achieve. And that doesn't mean that you no longer care for results. It just means that you have different targets. You'll be chasing different things. Maybe you'll be chasing those things at a different pace. And this is why tip number 6 matters. And this tip is that you should mind the time. I mentioned earlier that one of the things that will change drastically is how much time you have to yourself, or how much time you have to decide whatever it is that you want to do, because you're no longer tied to report to the office at this time and leave at this time kind of structure. So I do some work with teenagers, and one of the things I have observed about them is that they sort of go wild with their hair when they first leave school, and they no longer have to stick to hair rules, I think the equivalent for me when I made the transition is how I organize my time. For almost 30 years, because I was in corporate for 20-something years, but before that I had worked in non-profits. It was really, that cycle of waking up early, going to work, when I got children, getting them ready for school, taking them to school, picking them up, supervising homework, going to sleep. At some point in my life, I was studying for a further degree, and the pace just seemed to get more and more complicated, more complex, more demanding as time went on. And I really didn't have a challenge waking up that early and doing all those things. And I considered myself to be a morning person. But I just realized that maybe I wasn't, because that has changed completely. And I think one of the first things that sort of went haywire in the first few months after I made the transition was that I was just like, I was very busy. I was doing a lot of things, but I wasn't really working. I wasn't really paying attention to my sales activities for my business. At one point, I realized that there was nothing in the pipeline. I was servicing clients that I had before, but I didn't have anyone that could potentially become a client because I wasn't putting in time to make the necessary contacts and to follow up. But I was busy, I must say that I think I was very lucky that I had some old customers who kept me going those first few months. I remember one time, going to bed, believing that the workshop I was preparing for was going to happen 2 days later, and then realizing that it was actually happening the following day. And I had not sent the materials out for photocopying. And I'm not talking few materials, I'm talking about something like 20 pages of materials for 70 students. Okay, so anyway, I survived, but it really made me realize that I needed to reorganize my time. And I listened to a webinar or a podcast or something like that that was targeting solopreneurs. And in fact, that's the first time that I came across this term. And the speaker suggested that solopreneurs need to block off chunks of time for similar activities. So block off chunks of time for your admin work, chunks of time for your sales activities, chunks of time for, whatever it is that you need to do, significant things that you need to do on a regular basis, and especially things that you have to do, like, managing your records for tax purposes. And so I decided to reorganize my week. So Mondays are for admin work. I generally don't set up any meetings. I may once in a while agree to a meeting, but generally Monday is for my admin work, banking. I may use it for research if I'm writing an article or I'm preparing for a talk, and then also for planning for the coming week. And then I schedule my coaching activities for Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, and Saturdays as well, certain Saturdays. And then for Friday, I decided that I was going to make Friday flexible, partly because I think that after so many years of not having any weekends, because usually at the weekend, I would be, doing things for my children or organizing things that I couldn't do while I was working, on Sundays my house help would go off, I just think that I have earned a 3-day weekend. So Friday is flexible. Sometimes I will work. Sometimes I will do gardening, whatever it is. But the point is that I reorganized my week. But it's not just the week that I reorganized. I also realized that if I start my day with maybe exercising, perhaps doing some journaling and self-reflection and that kind of thing, and then getting into real work, maybe 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock for 3 or 4 hours, and then I can take a break. And then if I need to, I can come back to it later in the evening. I was actually able to put in more hours, more meaningful hours, doing things that are meaningful. But it also helped me to find time for doing other things that I enjoy and that I didn't always have time for. So I like to talk about my creative afternoons, where I might just decide to do some, some crochet or some knitting or some sewing or something like that. I have rediscovered gardening and that kind of thing. So just organizing my day. But the thing is that my day is organized very differently from the way it was when I was working. And so as you organize your time, just remember that it doesn't have to be the way it used to be when you're working as an employee of a large corporation. I slept quite a bit the first month, I have to say, but I think I was just tired after all those years. And it was also December anyway. December, even when I was working, I was usually on leave in December. But that also meant that when January came, I was refreshed and it was easier for me to start, really putting in the work that I needed to now focus on my business. So mind the time, take the time to refresh, take the time to rejuvenate. You don't have to jump directly into something serious, as in you leave on Friday and Monday you're going into something serious. Don't push yourself to do that. You don't have to. But even as you are managing the time, I think that it's also important to go with your flow, and this is tip number 7. I spent more than 30 years sort of sticking to a structure and sticking to a routine that was forced on me because of the nature of work, because of my personal responsibilities to my family and that kind of thing. But now I have actually found a different flow. It makes it easier for me to work when I'm at my best. And being at my best has got nothing to do with what time of day it is. It's just listening to my body, listening to my mind, and actually getting to do whatever it is that I need to do when I'm at my best. It could be morning, it could be afternoon, it could be evening or night. I work from home. I have an office at home, and but I also try to organize activities that take me out, take me out of the home compound, whether it is going out for exercise or whether it is organizing meetings. Of course, this is pre-COVID. With COVID, certain things have had to change. Excuse me. Sorry, my power has gone, so I just need to go onto my backup Wi-Fi. Okay, I think I'm okay. So just find your flow and don't feel constrained to do things exactly the way you used to do them when you are employed. Whether you want to have a breakfast meeting or a lunch meeting, or you want to have a meeting, at a restaurant, or you want to have a meeting in the office, it's really up to you. Given that you have already borrowed with pride, given your experience, you know how to run an efficient meeting, so you're always prepared. You know what you want. You're not beating about the bush. You can spot, the people who really have got nothing to offer, people who are just there to waste your time and, drink your coffee and that kind of thing. And do not apologize for this. I mean, if you cannot choose who you want to interact with and how you want to interact with them at this point of your life, when are you going to choose? I mean, when are you going to be able to do that? So be confident about what you want so that you don't just go for what is available. And if you go for what you want, you're more likely to make a success of it because you're more likely to be in the zone as you're working on whatever it is you choose to work on. And so you're more likely to thrive. And that now brings me to lesson number 8, which is about talent. And that's tapping into your own talent. As a marketing professional, I was often involved in the creation of artworks. My own taste is rather simple. If you look at, like my flyers and things like that, I like simplicity. I like bold colors, but not too many colors, playing around with fonts, playing around with copy, a few well-chosen words and that kind of thing. So when work came back from designers, I think they would get frustrated because I just wanted simple things. And I think that for them, simplicity meant that they couldn't show off their skills. But there was also the politics of who likes what. My role as a defender of the brand guidelines was actually one of the most stressful, especially in my earlier years when I was a junior marketer, brand manager. Sometimes the CEO just doesn't like something, even if it doesn't make sense from a brand point of view, and you're trying to play politics, with that creative aspect of your role. But today I design my own artworks. I have no go-betweens. I know from experience the importance of having someone else look at the copy. They can spot errors. They can make suggestions that will improve everything. But I just love the freedom to do my own creatives. This was not my job. I wasn't hired to do the creatives. I had a different role as a marketer and somebody else did the creatives. And you may be in a similar situation. You have been hired to do one thing, but you have other talents or you have other skills that you don't necessarily employ at work. By all means, explore them and exploit them once you make the transition. It will also help you to minimize costs if you're running a small business. And I have to say that for me, this is one of the perks of being a solopreneur. You are the boss and you decide what the job descriptions are for each role, including yours. So you have the final word. But of course, that also means that you have the responsibility to make every decision. And if you don't like making those final decisions, then don't become a solopreneur. If you're not comfortable making decisions for your business, consider a different business model, because as a solopreneur, you make the final decisions in every instance. And that now brings me to tip number 9, which is about maintaining intellectual stimulation. When you wake up every day and go to an office, you interact with people all the time, you have conversations at a certain intellectual level frequently in the course of the day. You are probably trying to maintain your skills, your knowledge in whatever profession you are in. Maybe you study, maybe you read certain articles, probably you're a member of certain networks or certain professional associations, and all these things help to maintain your intellectual stimulation. As a solopreneur, you work alone a lot of the time. So it's important to be very intentional about how you maintain your intellectual stimulation. So as you're thinking about your personal finances, don't cut off all those subscriptions to newsletters, to magazines, to clubs, or to associations. I think it's important for you to maintain some of those associations. Otherwise, your mind will deteriorate very quickly. Studies suggest that brain function actually declines very rapidly when you stop your regular work and put your feet up. And much as you may not be putting your feet up as a solopreneur, the fact that you're slowing down may signal to your brain that you are slowing down. I mean, it will tell your brain that you're slowing down, and perhaps it will shut off certain functions. As they say, if you don't use it, you lose it. So keeping up stimulating interpersonal interactions and physical activity is going to help to slow down memory loss. As a solopreneur, it's even more important to ensure that you have networks that force you to read, that force you to have certain conversations at a certain intellectual level, that force you to get out of your office, that force you to get out of your home. So don't shut off those things completely. I think that it's important for you to do that unless you want to go downhill very fast. So those are my 9 tips for, transitioning from corporate collaborator to solopreneur. And before I go into the last section, I'll just remind you what those tips are. So the first one is just for you to recognize the opportunity and to seize it. Maybe you have been thinking about doing something. Maybe you're not considering it to be your transition plan, but it could very easily become your transition plan. So put in place whatever you can put in place now, because it will help you to transition into something. Borrow with pride, just being mindful that there are certain things that are proprietary to the organization. So don't take those things. Be very aware that your corporate life is going to end. So don't act that you will be in corporate forever, or whatever it is that you're doing today. If you're employed and you're earning a regular paycheck, don't pretend, don't lie to yourself that it is going to continue forever. It won't. It's going to end sometime. And if you can plan for that time, it will make your transition that much easier. Manage your networks, work your networks, both internal and external. Remember that you can choose where you want to invest your resources today, so that when you leave that role that you're playing today, you don't leave such a big gap. And this is what I meant when I was talking about, the pizza and what's on your pizza, choosing what you want on your pizza. Time, you will have more time on your hands, mind the time, but also find your flow. So you don't have to do things the way you did them or at the times that you did them when you are employed. Tap into your own talent. If not now, when? Tap into your own talent, commercialize it, enjoy it. And finally, maintain intellectual stimulation. This I think is very important. You might have read about certain studies that show that people go downhill very fast after they retire if they are not mindful of maintaining intellectual stimulation. Okay, so you might be thinking, how come it's all hunky-dory? Everything is nice, the transition was very smooth. It wasn't that smooth. Let's be honest, there are times when my heart would beat very fast when I thought about the future, because I couldn't see the future. I thought to myself, there were times when I was employed and my leave was coming to an end. I would think, God, do I have to go back? Do I have to go back? And now suddenly here I was on a leave that was never going to end. And sometimes I would get minor panic attacks. And of course, I have had business challenges. So in year one, I think I met my revenue targets. They weren't very high, but as I said, because I had existing customers, I was able to go directly into some kind of a business, but I actually didn't gain any new customers that year. And of course, that's a danger sign for a business. I also wasn't profitable because I was putting a lot of money into establishing certain things, buying certain assets that were needed for the business. So I wasn't profitable. Year two, I made a better effort at managing my sales pipeline. I gained some new customers. I didn't have to spend so much money on assets and things like that. So my profitability improved. I tried some new programs. Some of them didn't work. And of course, this is just part of the business. You may launch a new product, you may launch a new service, but it won't necessarily do well. And I fell short of my revenue target. And you know what happened in year 3, 2020? COVID came. But what I have realized is that COVID has provided its own gift. And as far as business is concerned, one of the important things that has happened is that I have been forced to accelerate my plans to digitize my work. As a coach, I can do coaching virtually and I can do coaching face-to-face, but I also run workshops and I do talks such as this one, and I was doing all those things face-to-face. In fact, the day that the president announced that we were not to have face-to-face meetings, I was out of Nairobi putting final touches on a workshop that I was due to have the following day. I went ahead with the workshop, but half of the people who had signed up didn't show up because they maybe they were afraid, or they just thought that, you know, that was the right thing to do. And since then, I haven't had any face-to-face workshops and things like that. So I was forced to very quickly digitize my work, make my content digital friendly, start running digital workshops. It's not the same thing. But what I have noticed is that in the previous 3 years, I would have one big workshop and then have a dry period of several weeks or even months, and maybe have another large workshop. But now I am able to have more regular, smaller, yes, but more regular activities, more regular workshops, more regular talks. And I'm trying out, I'm experimenting with a few other digital activities. If it wasn't for COVID, I would probably wouldn't be where I am as far as virtual content and virtual activities are concerned. So I have had to use different delivery methods. I'm doing different timings, workshops that will take a full day. I'm having to break them down because if you're doing a virtual meeting, it can be very difficult for people to concentrate beyond 90 minutes or so. The frequency or the lag between my activities has had to change. And I have also had to look at my costing models. So essentially, COVID changed certain things, but it hasn't stopped me going. I really believe that I'm a builder and I love creating things from nothing. So I'm developing new content, I'm creating new programs. I mentioned that I'm a doctoral candidate. And why am I saying this? I'm saying this because I fully believe that you can start something new at age 50 and live to cut the ribbon celebrating 50 years of that new company that you started, that new business that you started, that new program that you started. I fully believe that the fact that you are 50 or the fact that you have retired or the fact that you have been made redundant does not mean you cannot create things. It does not mean that you cannot start new things. In the first few months, I would attend some activities organized for entrepreneurs, and I noticed very quickly that those activities were full of 20-something-year-olds. And to this day, I ask myself, are you telling me that people who are 50, 60 years old cannot be entrepreneurs? I mean, you have all that experience from a corporation, yes, but as far as whatever you're starting is concerned, you're an entrepreneur. So, and I'm encouraging you to just tap into your creativity, try things. Things will work, things will not work, but if you don't try, you won't know whether or not they could work. And before I finish, just a reminder that as a coach, I actually help people to make transitions such as this one that I am talking about. You know, really just to start with clarifying what you want for yourself in the future, helping you to think through what you need to do in order to achieve whatever it is that you want for the future, determining the gap, assessing where you are now, then creating a plan that you can begin to execute and move towards a future that you desire. So if you want me to help you, I am available. I'm going to give you my email at the end. That's really the end of my presentation. And now I'm inviting you to ask me any questions that you might have, or to share any comments that you might have. Yes, Marcy.
Jackie, thank you very much. That was very invigorating. I'm many years away from retirement, but I can already see things that I could actually use just to transition to a higher leadership role at work. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you for participating, and thank you for your comment. Yes, Electina?
Jackie, thank you very much. And let me just say this. I can already see things that that you're talking about that make the difference for me. One of the things that I take pride in is borrowing with pride. I work in an institution where processes and ideas work. on discipline, on resilience, on teamwork. And I've seen it influencing not just my work, but also my life. So borrowing with pride for sure, I can see. I also enjoy, I also like what you said, the issue of maintaining intellectual stimulation. It's not just when you're, let's say, out of work, but also many times when people are working, you get to a point where you think you've made it. And if it's very dangerous, because then you just start sliding back. But thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you too. We actually have two Mercies on the call. So Mercy number 2, thank you for your comment. Mercy just says that she's thanking me for the great insights. Anyone else with a comment or a question?
Jackie, thank you. Maybe just comment to add on to what you said.
Yes.
Just 2 things, but first I'd like to thank you very much and just confirm that everything you said is true story. Absolutely true story, now that I'm in your space. So just to add 2 more things that I have also learned in this space where you are. One is just the power of flexibility. You need to remember that what you plan while you're still in employment, for example, is what might not really become once you become an entrepreneur. Your plans could completely go awry or south, not because of your own fault, but because of circumstances beyond you, e.g. COVID, as we said. So learn to be flexible, learn to reinvent, listen to the client. Half of the things we are now doing is because this is what the client demands. So every plan we had made in 2020 has sort of just changed without us wanting to. So be flexible to the client, be flexible in your mind. And one of the things one of my sisters who is here said is, for example, I went through shock that I didn't have maybe friends outside family, and all my friends, majority were workmates. So if it was a child being born, we were going to see a child from a workmate's perspective. A wedding, it was a workmate's daughter getting married. And after leaving, then they were not keeping in touch. And at a point I was in shock. Then I realized the only glue that kept us together was because we were working in the same institution. So I had to be flexible and learn to make new contacts, new social contacts, so that I'm able to move on. Then the second thing I'd like to say is that because I'm a financial coach, I've also learned that the financial plans that I had made also necessarily didn't work. So I have learned to say that don't let guilt over your past money mistakes shame you out of the future that you want. You will make mistakes. Even though I'm a financial coach, I have made some very serious mistakes when it comes to money. But I am determined not to make these money mistakes shame me about the future I want. So thank you very much for giving us this opportunity to listen to you, and also for the take-homes that we're picking.
Thank you for your comments, Pauline. And Violet also has put in the chat box that she has learned that she can start at any time, that no age is too old to start. Violet, indeed, that's very true. And just to finish, let me just remind you that whatever situation you face, whether you're making the transition into becoming a solopreneur or any other transition, even as relates to this situation with COVID, you bring into that situation your beliefs, your habits, the actions that you take as a result of those beliefs. Those beliefs could be helping you or they could be hindering you. And as you make any transition, as you navigate any challenge, if you are struggling, that is the place to look. Those beliefs. So COVID or retirement or redundancy does not make you a spendthrift. It does not make you indisciplined. You are that way. And so if you want to make amends, that is the place to look. But of course, you can always make changes. Thank you very much for your company this evening. I'm going to stop at that point. I will share a link to the recording once it's ready for anyone who may want to, refresh their memory. Thank you very much for participating this evening. One of the risks that we take as, speakers is that you can be ready with your, whatever it is that you're going to talk about and you have no audience. So I really appreciate you for being here this evening. Have a lovely weekend.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.